Welcome back to the Niche Podcast. Today I have a special treat for you. One of my best buyers, one of the people that I look up to in the Kansas City market more than most anyone. This man's done about 1,500 deals in his life, been in real estate over 20 years, still does well over 100 deals a year. I have Joe Williams for you. Thanks for being here, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
But no, Joe and I have a long history together, done many, many deals together. I kind of wanted to bring everyone in and try to figure out, the mind behind a real buyer. How do you connect? If you're a new wholesaler or an experienced wholesaler, how do you connect with a guy like this and get their attention? So I kind of want to go through that whole gamut today, your backstory and all of that I just mentioned. But let's rewind a little bit. What first pulled you into real estate investing? How'd you get into this game?
Well, to be honest with you, I grew up, my mother was a realtor, and so I saw the business from a different angle at a young age. She was a single parent, so I saw her in action quite a bit. It was probably when I was about 18 years old, she sold a house to my uncle, and he turned around and sold it the next day to somebody else. Made a decent profit, never put anything into it, never did anything to it. And I was like, well, he didn't fix the house up. He just bought it for this price, sold it for more than what he bought it for. That next investor was able to do their thing, make their money. And I said, that looks pretty easy. And I'd love to get into doing something like that. And so I watched him do that several times. My mother's done it did it back in the day. She'd do it periodically, maybe one or two a year or something like that. And so I had some good influences when I was growing up, getting me into the business.
Tell me about your first deal.
All right, my first deal, very high-end area. I was 20 years old. Me and my best friend from high school, we bought this house. It was needed probably 40 grand worth of work. Nothing huge. I mean, it was, do a roof, do some interior cosmetics, get it back on the market. So we buy it from all people. It was my mother who sold it to us. She basically had wholesaled me my first deal, and she made about 50 grand on the deal. And but she set me up to make money. She wasn't going to sell me something that was going to put me in a bad position. So she got us in there. His parents co-signed on the deal. We bought the house. It was in a neighborhood called Old Leawood. And it was a house on I think it was a half-acre lot, all flat. Just, it was a big ranch. I think we bought it for about $165 to be, it's a long time ago, but we bought it for about $165. We put about $35 into it, and we resold it for $242. And I sold it in about 2 weeks on the market. And we were delighted. We got what we wanted. It was awesome. We were only 20 years old. We were making a good profit. 2 weeks later, the house was bulldozed. Somebody came in, knocked the house down, built an $800,000 home on the lot. And learned a lot from it, put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. It was us in there painting and doing all the carpentry work and stuff like that. And then, to see it all just get torn up and thrown away it was an eye-opener, to say the least. But, kind of learned that, it's more about the land that the house sits on than the actual house itself. And the other idea is people buy houses in all different conditions to do different things to them. And so you have to have an open mind to that when you're going into this. It's not only, the houses that are falling down that people want to change or bulldoze or whatever. Even houses that are fixed up, I mean, maybe they want to go in and do something completely different. So a lot of, it was a hell of a learning experience.
It's interesting thinking about that. I think in Leawood now, they're probably paying $500 or $600 for those houses they tear down.
Exactly.
Doing
yes.
the same stuff, just higher numbers.
Oh yeah. I mean, I would say I wish I held on to it for a while, but I'm glad it sold when it did.
So tell me a little bit. You did some of those deals. At what point in your mind did you realize, hey, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. What was that moment? What did that look like for you, if you can reflect back?
Well, I'll say that I was a 12-year-old kid in 6th grade at telling my friends that I was gonna drive a Corvette and sell houses for a living. I really did do that. I did.
There
It's
is a
about
Corvette outside,
yeah,
by the way.
yeah, yeah. I used to tell people that that's what I was gonna do when I got older. I didn't know I was gonna do it the way I'm doing it now. I watched my mother sell real estate as a realtor, and she had made a good living for me and her and my sister when she came along later on. And but no, it was probably before the recession in '08. I partnered up with a guy, and we did 3 or 4 deals over a summer. He had a company called Home Mortgage Rescue, and so he had already seen the writing on the wall, and he was getting in the door, and he was talking to people to help them get out of their foreclosure situation, or go through short sale process, whatever. And so he would use me as basically the guy who would dispo the property once he got it locked up. And we did a couple deals and stuff, split the profit. It was awesome. And then '08 hit, and a lot of things changed. But I saw the writing on the wall at that time, and this is probably '06, '07, maybe a little bit earlier. But I was started to see that you could take this deal, buy it, turn around and sell it, you know, and try to give it to somebody else at a price that makes sense for them as well, so that they can get their deal done, so they come back to you in the future. But that's kind of where we started to see. I started to feel like I could do this over and over and over again, but I didn't have the resources. I was just a guy that was learning from kind of other people. But yeah, that's kind of when I knew, I would say.
Gotcha. Before we hopped on the air, you were kind of telling me about your journey from being young, ambitious guy to having a concrete company to focusing on houses and exclusively on that. Can you kind of walk us through your younger years into now you're twice as old as that,
Yeah.
and kind of that journey along there so it can paint the picture for the audience of kind of your progression?
Well, when I was younger, I felt like I could open a business that did anything. I could, I wanted to have a mud jacking business, a foundation repair business, a radon mitigation business. I wanted to have a store selling material. I did all of those things other than the radon. I never started that one, but I started a business in each of these things. And at the same time, I'm selling real estate, buying and selling houses, doing all of those at once. And really, it took some of my mentors to kind of tell me, hey, if you focus on one thing that you do really well, you'll be a lot better off. And I had an emphasis on, you know, m- when you have that much stress and you have that much on your plate, you start if if it starts to take a toll on you, you start to think about things like your mental health, and you start to think about your physical health and what the stress does to you. And so I started to take an approach to make my life less stressful. And so I started to eliminate these businesses, as I went along. And the last one I sold was 6 years ago. I sold my foundation repair business, which my foundation repair business was a lot of my identity, because that's how I got a lot of my deals. I bought a lot of houses with bad basements, and I even had a LLC called We Buy Broken Basements. So that was an emphasis for me, and that was a niche for me. If you know, so uh, but what I've kind of figured out though is, if you find something that really works, um, that's what you have to focus on, and that's what worked for me. Is I turned my attention towards just the buying and selling, and I was lucky enough to be able to sell the business for a profit, and use those resources to make my business stronger, and kind of went from there. But it was more about less stress than it was. I had ambition to do all these things, and those businesses could have done well. It's just I didn't have, I didn't feel like I wanted to take on all of that anymore.
Right. I know I always tell people in the community real estate's good because there's a lot of ways to make money, but real estate's bad because there's a lot of ways to make money.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us struggle with that shiny object syndrome where we're constantly looking to the next greatest thing,
Yeah.
including myself. We were walking around this building that we're sitting in before we hopped on the podcast and
Mhm.
starting an educations company, starting a technology company. We're doing our regular acquisition company. So it's a lot going on.
Mhm.
You had a lot of that stuff back in the day, and I know you've pared back. What was that moment, or what was the advice from one of your mentors to where you knew, hey, look, all this is a distraction. I really need to focus on my core competency.
Well, it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago where I was doing everything, buying and selling at the same volume I am now, but, with all these other things. And, I had a lot of employees. I had a lot of liability. I had vehicles out everywhere. I had, homeowners I was dealing with. I just had a lot of going on. And, it's basically like, hey, if you focus all your attention on what you're good at, this other stuff won't matter. And so I'd say probably 7, 8 years ago is when I was like, all right, I'm going to sell these other businesses and this is what I'm going to do. And, from there, it's done nothing but grow. And, in at my speed, the speed that I prefer, because that's one of the greatest things about real estate is you can do it at your own pace and you can do how much you want to do or how much you don't want to do. And for me, um, I've gotten to a pace that I feel really comfortable with, and that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Okay. Why don't you break down your current business model? I know you said in the past you had big teams, big employees, big overhead, but what does your business look like now? What does your day to day look like? Maybe what your team looks like?
Mhm.
Expand on that for us.
So nowadays, I have my silent partner who is somebody I've worked with. I've been with them since 2009, and I've got him who's basically, we communicate almost every single day, whether it's about deals or about golf or about sports or whatever it may be. We're family, but, we communicate every day. And then I've got my brother-in-law who he oversees all my projects. He is also an investor in my business. He does a lot of, basically make sure that everything goes smoothly outside of the buying and selling. And my sister is my office manager. She's basically my right side of the brain. She makes sure that everything is the way it should be. I don't know if that's right or left, but anyway, she's the side of the brain that keeps everything organized and in check. And so I work with my family. I work with people close to me. All of my guys that are out there working on my houses, they've all worked with me for, you know, probably 10, 12 years now. Some of them longer. Some of them I've known since they were kids. We have a small group. As far as these operations go, we have, probably 4 to 5 laborers, and then we have, project manager, office manager, and then myself. And so that's basically the gist of it.
Gotcha.
So,
So you got a good sized team, but relatively small compared to what it was. What I found interesting about you when we first got to know each other many years ago was that everyone else seemed to have their formula that they used to figure out what they could offer for a house. Most of them came from that like fix and flipper lens to where it's like, hey, 75% minus repairs or whatever it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
And they would come up with these numbers that were very similar. Then I would send something to you and you would often pay a fair amount more than
Mhm.
other people. And I didn't understand how you made money.
Mhm.
So over time, I started following what you were doing and trying to understand. And I actually coined a verb. Joe Williamsed me to
Mhm.
where he had a knowledge of how to dispo a property or do something with it that was different than everyone else. Can you kind of outline how you think about deals and how it's kind of different than the average investor.
Well, um, when I look at a property, there's a couple things that are extremely important to me. And those things really gauge my interest. The first thing and the most important thing I believe over anything else is days on market. And if you're working in a neighborhood that sells very quickly, you're in a good position. Your exit strategy gets that much easier because it's a sought after area. So I mean that is by far the most important thing to me. From then, I go to, is it a traditional floor plan? Is it something that the average buyer is going to walk into and say, yeah, this makes sense to me? And then from there, it's what's the condition of the house? Can I pick this house up for 175 and turn around and sell it to somebody else on the market for 225 right away? Because it's not all fixed up, but it's clean and livable, and it was livable to somebody before, and that usually means it's livable to the next person, or that you'll find that person that is willing to buy the house in the condition it's in. And so they coined that phrase wholesaling. I just was buying houses that I felt were livable, and I'd turn around and sell them to somebody else. For me, I that was part of it. I also buy the houses that are falling apart, and you know that very well. I will buy houses full of stuff. I'll buy them with the foundation walls caved in. I'll buy them with the roof caved in. I buy them in all conditions as long as the numbers make sense. And when I say that, it's a broad term because a house in Brookside with the roof falling in is worth a lot more than a house in Independence with the roof falling in. And so if I'll pull the trigger on that because I know I'll be able to find a buyer, because maybe it's not the rehabber or the flipper that wants it, but maybe it's the end user that wants to go in and put in the sweat equity to make it their own because of where it's located. And so, that's, I think, one of the most, everybody says, what was the first thing you ever heard about real estate? Location, location, location. Well, days on market is that. I'm looking for locations with low days on market. As long as you find that, then, it's not very hard to find a way out of the property, and that's what motivates me, I think, more than anything else, and gets me to jump on a property when it's brought to me.
I think the way you do things really changed how I looked at real estate. It was always the fix and flip numbers or maximizing the value. And then years ago, we started wholetailing and throwing stuff on the market. And it's just like, oh, you don't have to do something the way everyone else does it. So that our relationship has made me significant amounts of money. And I appreciate you always for that and still want to keep doing deals. But when you think about your business now, how are you optimizing your business in terms of what are you focusing on? Is it, having cash on hand, cash flow, long-term wealth? Is it passing through houses really quickly? Like, what about your business are the main priorities for you in your life right now?
Right now, I would say that, I'm turning and burning. That's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to buy and resell as fast as I can, make the profit, move on. There's major parts of me that want to buy a bunch of rental property. There's big parts of me that want to, invest in those type of things, multifamily, whatever it may be. But, when I step back and I look at it, I'm like, okay, yeah, that looks great and all, but what I do doesn't require much of me. And if I had a bunch of tenants, if I had a bunch of land, calls, like, dealing with it as a landlord, I mean, do I want that stress? I don't know. And so my focus is always, I kind of always go back to, I just like turning and burning, buying and selling as fast as I can. And, I want to build a business that, is sustainable for my family. I want my children to learn what I do. They don't necessarily have to have this as their main occupation, but to have it in their back pocket would be, I think, very useful to them as they grow older and have more resources. And, I think that, I have family working with me, so I want to make sure that I'm able to, provide a business that's able to take care of and so they can take care of their families and do that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, like there's so many different ways to do this in this business. But for me, what's easiest and what feels like it makes the most sense is to buy and sell as fast as I can.
It's interesting in this age of social media where you're comparing yourself to other people. And I'm in masterminds where there's people doing 500 deals a year, 1,000 deals a year. And it's like, oh, I got to be like that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I sit back after I've built something really big and a lot of people. And it's like, it was kind of fun when it was just me and my father and my mother. And we were doing 10 or 15 deals a month, and we were turning and burning like you. And it's like we were very simple people, had a lot of cash flow on hand. Then we started gathering the assets, right? All the rentals we bought sub-2 out of foreclosure and stuff like that. And all of a sudden there's operational complexity and very large overhead and things like that. And then you start coming full circle. It's like, maybe I kind of want that smaller life. How long did that take you going from someone that had a lot of ambition to, hey, look, I kind of just want to make a lot of money and be with my family?
It comes with age. I'm telling you, man. Every year you realize how much shorter it gets, how much faster time goes. And as you watch your children grow and you and your parents get older and everything around you, and it really makes you put things in perspective and kind of realize, like, what's the whole purpose of all of this, and like what is really truly freedom in life. And I believe it's making a lot of money, being able to spend time with the people you love, and having the freedom to pick up and put down the phone whenever you want. And that's what real estate does for us. And we all take it at our own pace. I prefer to take it at a certain pace, and it works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but I feel very fortunate that I'm able to. I take a 2 to 5 mile walk with my wife every morning. I drive my kids to school every morning. I drive them to practice at night. I play golf all day long, just about every single weekday, Monday through Friday. And I couldn't ask for anything better than that, because that's what people work their whole lives to do when they're in their 60s. Drive their grandkids around and play golf, when they can barely swing. Well, I'm just learning the sport right now, but I'm getting better at it. And all I'm saying is like, if I got to a point, and it had a lot to do with just as I got older, realizing what was important to me, and freedom to do whatever the hell I want is what is important to me. And my family is, and what I enjoy doing is obviously top of the list.
I'm asking this question kind of selfishly because I'm at the position to where you probably were with all of your different businesses, your concrete business, real estate business, a lot of ambition, a lot of excitement and stuff. But when you decided to make that pivot, what was that like, deconstructing everything? Was there some pain along the way? I kind of illustrate that for us.
Well, I wouldn't have gotten to the deconstruction phase if I didn't go through a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress and a lot of sleepless nights, and for that to go away, it took time for me to realize that I'd gotten to a point in my life where I had the freedom to do what I wanted to do. And, I'd say that my wife, my family can kind of attest to it. Is, that first year was very strange for me. And I still felt like I needed to go somewhere, be somewhere. And I felt like I had to be somewhere to work and all this stuff. And now, it took some time, but, after that first 6 months to a year, it kind of faded away. And then I started realizing, COVID helped a little bit because, it changed all of our lives. But, I started figuring out, I'm like, hey, I can buy and sell these houses while I'm sitting in this golf cart, or I can get in a motorhome and drive my family to Colorado and still buy and sell houses. I can fly to Hawaii and buy and sell houses. One time I was in LA. This is 3 years ago. I was in LA. I sold 10 houses while I was in LA. I was there for 5 days. It was, I'll never forget, May 10th through May 15th, I just boom, boom, boom. I was just reeling them off. You can buy and sell houses from wherever you want, doing whatever you want, if you want to do it that way. I didn't always think that way. I mean, I felt like I needed to be somewhere. Now, my places where I needed to be, where I'd be at my lake house, where I'd be sitting at a desk, but I'd have my lake right there where I could see it, or I'd be sitting in my pontoon boat, or I'd be somewhere like that. Now I feel like I can be home. I can be walking down the street with my wife. I can be, like I said, on a golf cart, on my boat, or wherever I want to be. I feel like I can do this business. And, again, it doesn't work that way for everybody. It, but it can if you want it to. But I would say that just kind of realizing that you have that freedom. I mean, that's kind of what led me to that.
So you obviously have figured out how to craft kind of your perfect lifestyle to where you can do deals, you can be with family, you can go on vacations. This is kind of what everyone strives for, but we don't necessarily know how to get there.
Hmm.
For those of us that are figuring out how we want to build our business, we're just starting to build things out. How did you position yourself as a buyer and a reseller to where people send you these opportunities and you can just chill and basically say yes or no? How did you establish that reputation or that identity as the trusted one?
It it took a lot of experience. First of all, I had obviously years of owning a foundation repair company. I'm walking in somebody's basement looking at the worst possible thing that could happen to a house. And so I would see that over and over and over again. And one of the things I realized was, no matter how bad this foundation is, this house is going to continue to serve its purpose. Whether it's this woman that it can't live here anymore because it's bothering her so much, there's going to be another family that moves in here later on and they're still going to serve this purpose. And so, I started to think about these deals and start to realize that, I can put in the time to go look at these houses and do all this stuff and hyper analyze it and do all that, or I can trust the person that's bringing it to me. I know what I'm buying because of the experience that I've had. And so I don't put my sellers through a lot at all. Like once I sign a contract, it's over with. They don't even really hear from me. In fact, sometimes I get a call from them and say, "Are you still in the deal?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just waiting for you to tell me when to close." That's how you need to be as a buyer.
Mm.
It takes time to be educated enough to do it that way, but once you know and you're comfortable with here's the three big things: roof, foundation, sewer. If you're comfortable with those three things on a property and, there's really no other reason to go back there, to bring your contractor to I know that that's all part of it for a lot of us when we're getting started, and that's okay. But when you're doing it at a volume, you can't do it that way because you have to be able to get in, make your person that's bringing you the deal feel comfortable that you're going to close it. And so, what's really worked for me is making things stress free for the seller or the wholesaler or the assigner, whoever is giving me the deal. I don't really give them much to worry about, and that has been a major asset for me. And that has come with, like I said, it took a lot of experience. I had to learn a lot of things about houses in order to feel as comfortable as I do. But I buy houses sight unseen every single day. And it's because I can look at the pictures. I work with people I trust. And, if the numbers make sense, I can pull the trigger and they don't ever have to open the door for me again. And that's a big part of this. And, obviously, when you get to the end of it, you got to have the resources that don't require a lot of that type of stuff, which is obviously inspections, appraisals, lender walkthroughs or whatever it may be. I mean, there's a lot of things that buyers have to do, and that's okay. I'm just that I don't. I've gotten to the point where that isn't part of what I have to do. Now, I sell to people every day that do have to have the house inspected. They've got to have it appraised. They have to have their lender's approval on every single thing. They've got to, I go through that all the time. But again, that comes back to experience. I have the experience to deal with that type of buyer. But I have enough experience and enough knowledge to know that my seller doesn't want to deal with any of that. So, I mean, that's kind of where it works for me.
It's interesting. Over the years, people talk about their huge buyers list. I have thousands of people on my buyers list. And I've played that game, and sometimes it works, but most of the time it doesn't. But it's actually from this gentleman across the table that I've developed the criteria for being on my buyers list. Number one, you can buy with cash in a week or 10 days if I need you to.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you'll buy blind if I give you really good pictures and video.
Mm-hmm.
Number three, you don't care what I make.
Mm-hmm.
And there are very, very few people that fit that criteria.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking before we got on the air. There's like 6 or 8 people in Kansas City that I focus on, and Joe's at the top of that list.
I appreciate that.
Over the years, you've probably had people come and go. A lot of wholesalers that,
Sure.
were selling you houses, but then maybe they go away for a while. Can you kind of paint the picture of the arc? Like, what often are they experiencing with other buyers that they don't have a good relationship with?
Well, ultimately, I think that it comes down to when people get into this business, there's a lot of, it seems real glitzy, glamorous because we see it all on HD TV. And when you get into it, you get a couple deals done, you start feeling like you know what you're doing, you start feeling confident, you start getting arrogant. And if you act that way when you're going into your transactions with buyers and stuff, you can burn or with your sellers, you can burn some bridges that way. That's one way. Another way is, obviously always trying to renegotiate or always changing the terms or, not performing. I mean, those are all major red flags, obviously. Switching lenders or out of state lenders and whatever it may be. I mean, there's a lot of things that can make a buyer less attractive to a seller that sells all the time. And, those are things that, we need to be, as a buyer, if you want to have success on a consistent basis, know what you're buying before you make that offer. Because if you're experienced and you want that seller to trust you over and over and over again, you need to be able to, the minute you sign that contract, it's the last thing you guys talk about is any negotiations of terms whatsoever, unless they come back to you and say, hey, I need to extend the contract, or, hey, we've got a situation with this seller. We've got to, whatever it may be. On your end as the buyer, you're not the one who really if you want to establish the right reputation, you're not the one who changes the terms. The seller might be changing terms and you may have to negotiate that. But if you want to consistently get the deals and have them come to you, you have to be an easy buyer.
And you've always been that for me.
Yeah.
And that's why you have so many streams of deal flow coming to you, because I don't know how many deals we've done over the years, 50, 100, more than that.
Oh, yeah.
To where I don't think there's been one time where you've ever come back at the last second, well, I actually need to be at this price or whatever. The only time that you didn't close if there was some big title issue or something, and it wasn't your fault. And that's how you've become who you've become. So I have one more question about kind of your business. Then I want to pivot over to how can people learn to connect with you and do a good job from the other side? Obviously, we've painted a picture. How can a buyer be good for a wholesaler? But we want to paint the picture from the other direction. But before we get to that, if someone shadowed your business, I know you're more of a lifestyle guy, but if they shadowed your business, what would they see? What would surprise them about your operation? What would they find interesting?
Well, I mean, honestly, what most people find interesting is the fact that I work about an hour a week. Physically, I show up, we go to a meeting once a week for an hour. And I really consider that my full work week. It's on Tuesday at 11, or no, wait, Monday at noon. It used to be Tuesday at 11. Monday at noon, and then I'm done. Beyond that, everything, like I said, is done from somewhere I want to be, whether it's a boat or a golf cart or whatever. But when it comes to our business, I think that, it's the overall, like, I approach these deals. Obviously, the very first thing I want to do is turn around and sell it. But I can't always do that. It's not a perfect world, especially not in real estate. So we have different ways to skin the cat. And so the first thing is I'll try to do some sort of specific repair, whether it's the roof, foundation, sewer, anything major, the flaw that's really like deterring people, I'll go in and try to fix that. Put it on the market, see what happens. If that doesn't get it sold after a couple price adjustments, then we're going to take it off the market, go in, flip the whole thing. Now, am I moving walls or doing different things like that? No. I am going in and I'm painting walls, trim, doing flooring, countertops. I'm trying to save as many cabinets as possible. We'll flip out switches and fixtures and stuff like that. Quick cosmetic remodels. And, then we'll put them on the market. And again, we're only working in A and B neighborhoods where it's low days on market regardless. So we're putting out probably a B product in an A neighborhood kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it usually ends up selling. And, worst case scenario, you go through all those steps. You try to wholesale it, doesn't work. You try to flip it, or do the major repair, and that doesn't work. And then you flip it, that doesn't work. Then you're stuck with something in an A or B neighborhood that you're going to have to refinance and turn into a rental. I mean, ultimately, that's kind of the way I look at the whole succession of things. How often do I get to the last step? Never. I am able to unload those properties before I get to that last step. But, when we go about these things, when we acquire a property, that property, we're trying if it doesn't sell within that first 3 to 5 day period, then we're starting the process one way or another to get the thing to where we can get it on the market one way or another to sell. I mean, as far as is it interesting? Yeah. I mean, we have a kind of an idea of, a course of action of how we do these things and stuff. But I think the most interesting part is, how I'm able to have the freedom I have. But, maybe that's just unbiased. But
I don't think it's biased.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would love to know how they can, have a multi-million-dollar business sitting on their boat or riding around golf cart at the course. But we've established, how a top buyer thinks, how you can disposition things differently, how you can build trust with wholesalers in your market. Let's take it from the other side of things. How does a new wholesaler, or any wholesaler for that matter, in a market establish a relationship with someone like you to where you want to look at their deals? You want to do deals with them?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think that, I get deals from people every day. And the big wholesalers, small wholesalers, people who have never done it before and this is their first deal. I mean, ultimately, it's just being honest and truthful about what you have, taking detailed pictures of the issues, cracks in the sheetrock, cracks in the foundation. Is there a bunch of stuff around the sewer? The sewer clean out. Is the roof deteriorated? Are the ceilings on the second floor molded? I need to see the bad stuff. That disclosure is so important because once you're able to establish a relationship with somebody that you trust, you're going to take the time to look at their deal over somebody else's. And, just as well as I do, I get busy with doing what I want to do. So I don't always look at every deal right away. And, I probably have a couple sitting on my phone that are looking really good right now, but I look at them when I have time. But there's certain wholesalers that'll send stuff to me and I don't look at it just because they were not truthful with me the time prior or, whatever it may have been. There was a flaw or something that made it so I don't necessarily trust them. So I think that the biggest thing is to be trustworthy, be open, be understanding to the fact that, this is going to be negotiated. And I mean, kind of like what you were saying about, and it's one of the most important things I think as somebody in our position is not caring what they make on it, vice versa. So, a wholesaler will sell it to me and say, well, you're going to make this much on it. And I'm like, you're making your money right now. So why does that matter to you? I don't care what you make, So, I mean, there's just real simple common sense things there. Being trustworthy, being open, and obviously understanding that, we're all in it to make money. It doesn't matter if my number's bigger than yours or your number's bigger than mine. At the end of the day, everybody walks away with something, and it took the amount of effort that it takes, outweighs whatever, discrepancy you may have based on what you were walking away with. I believe that, you could sell me a deal and make 50 grand. Maybe I turn around and sell it and make 10 grand. I still feel like we both won. You did a lot of work for that deal. You sat in that living room. You talked to those homeowners. You got that lead and acquired it. I took on the liability of buying that thing and turning around and, selling it to somebody else who's got to go through all the steps that we talked about, like, the appraisals and the inspections and dealing with lenders and everything else. So I feel like that, I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Okay. You obviously prioritize your family, your lifestyle. When a wholesaler sends you a deal, you probably get, how many of them a day do you think you get, if you were to guess?
I'd say probably on average maybe 10 or 15 a day.
How many of those are you responding to or actually interested in?
Probably 4 or 5.
Okay. So maybe a third of them.
Maybe 3 or 4. Very, very few. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but like, I'm going to look at the address. That's going to turn the light bulb on one way or another, depending upon where it's located. And then from there, then it's, who's sending it to me, and then, does it make sense? So those are kind of the way I look at it.
So when those are presented to you, is there a way, as one of the best buyers in Kansas City, that it can be presented to you that is the most helpful, that a wholesaler is more than likely going to get your attention? I know you prioritize, days on market and area of the city, but what are some things they can do to attract your eyes a little bit more?
Well, the biggest thing to me, again, is, looking at the major components. And so if for a wholesaler, like, to be honest with you, I'm old school. When I get an email, whatever, I barely will look at the email because I know it's getting blasted out to everybody. But when I get a text message and, it's got a good solid description of the property, it's got good pictures, it's got everything's right there. Now, do I provide that for all the people I sell to? Probably not, but that's okay. That's not my position. But when I'm buying these properties, especially sight unseen, like I do a lot, I mean, really, what attracts me is just a lot of detail right up front. And I the first question I ask you and everybody else, foundation, roof, and sewer. Well, maybe not sewer as much, but foundation, roof, I'm always on top of that. Like that, because that's my biggest ticket. And I know the foundation stuff. So if you're like, oh, it's got some cracks, but this is what it's doing, then I feel comfortable. But like, ultimately it just, I like more personable communication. I like to feel like I'm on a short list, as opposed to being on the blast. I mean, I'm just not going to look at a blast as much just because, I don't know, they have different negotiating tactics. They have different ways of the way they want to accept offers, whether they want to sit on it and let people bring them in or however they want to do it. And I operate in maybe an old school fashion of real estate where it's just like, let's get this deal done, as quick as we can, and let's make it all make sense for everybody. And that's kind of
over the years, I've played with a lot of different ways to dispo properties. And I started with texting to like 3 or 5 guys, kind of like yourself, and that worked really well. Then it was like, oh, there's Investor Lift and these different things where you can blast it out to a jillion people. Mm-hmm. Well, then I tried that model, and it's like, oh, well, I'm not getting responses from my main guys anymore. What the heck? Why don't they like my deals anymore? Mm-hmm. Well, I then realized that I hated those type of deals too, because there's a particular company in Kansas City, I won't name who they are, but I kept track in my CRM. I offered on their houses 42 times. I got 0 deals from them. So I was conditioned at that point to that I will not make any money operating with this company at all. So I just ignore their stuff now. And now I'm back to, I'm just going to, text my top 4 or 5 guys and sell it. And for a long time, I wanted to get bigger and better, but then I saw, I don't know if you know Doug Hopkins, he's in Collective Genius down in Arizona, but they do about 500 deals a year in Arizona, and he has a small company. It's just him and one other guy that goes on the appointments. They lock up the contract with the seller in the living room, and then they text 3 or 5 people when they sit in the car, and they sell it within a couple of minutes. And it's like, hey, if that's good enough for me or them, it's good enough for me. So Guys, if you feel like you have to have giant buyers lists, you don't.
Mm-mm.
You really need a couple of core guys like Joe who you can count on, who are going to give you a good dollar, and you know they're going to close.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most important thing, obviously, is you got to close. And like, people can go out and they can spin your wheels and they can waste your time. But, if they don't close, then you're right back to square one. And it goes for me on my end too. When I'm turning around and selling to other people, like that's probably, as a seller, one of the things that drives me nuts. And it makes me cut people off. I'm like, all right, well, I'm just not going to send anything else to you anymore. I mean, if you're going to back out on the last day, or you're going to back out because of this thing or that thing, or you didn't have that organized and ready to go, it isn't going to work for me. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
So there's obviously people like me. I have a good relationship with you, but let's say that it's a new investor. They don't even have a deal, and they're just trying to find these good buyers. What type of value can the investor that's brand new, never done a deal, doesn't have anything for you to look at, how can they connect with you and get in your sphere?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, to to be honest with you, there's a lot of different ways that an investor or somebody getting into this business could do that. And I think that one of the things that I drive around every day and I see houses that I'm like, man, if I had the time or the motivation, I would call and try to find out who owns it or what's up with it or what's the situation. Those are the type of people, things that I would love to have people help me out with, here and there or something like that. That would be something, that's a start. But, even something for me would be somebody that could audit the deals that are coming into me. Because, like I said, I've got 10 to 20 deals a day coming into me. And how many of them do I actually look at? Like I said, three or four maybe, because there are three or four deals that I trust from a trusted source, so that I feel like, well, I mean, my goal every week, my goal is to buy two houses and sell two houses. That's my goal every week. And I started that probably, 8 to 10 years ago, where I was like, I gotta buy two houses, gotta sell two houses. As long as I do that, I'll be okay. And if I'm getting bombarded with deals, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of leads. I mean, do I want to buy them all? No. But I mean, if I had somebody that was actually auditing them for me and looking at them and telling me, hey, this one does make sense or this one doesn't make sense, or that would be a major help to me.
Mm.
I mean, if you're asking, that would probably be one of the number one places I could use help.
Guys, if you're wanting those good buyers, you might have to do some unscalable things. You might have to do some things for free. That's part of it to develop these relationships. My relationship with Joe's worth millions of dollars to me over time, and I hope it's worth just as much
Yeah.
the other direction. So you've done about 1,500 deals at this point. You've probably seen some wild stuff. Just for fun, what are a couple of your most memorable deals and some craziness that you've dealt with?
Well, I mean, for instance, I just finished one where I bought a house from a wholesaler it was about 3 years ago. And he goes, yeah, the woman, she needs some time to move out. So you just need to call her in a week and she'll be ready to go. I'm like, all right, sounds good. So I call her in a week and I say, hey, this is Joe. I bought your house, blah, blah, blah. Just wanted to see how your move's coming along. She goes, I didn't sell my house. And I was like, yeah, you did. It's like, I paid for it. I know you did. You went to a title company, you sold it. Anyway, she wouldn't leave, and she didn't leave, and she got the city kind of helped her out in a way, and then I had to use my own title insurance to fight it and get the house back. It was a 2.5-year process, and there was, frustration, all those thoughts that you would have if you were dealing with this type of situation. But at the end of the day, I didn't go over there. I didn't do anything crazy. I'm going to let this title insurance take care of it. They took care of it. It took, and when you use title insurance, they're going to use lawyers who are going to make the deal last as long as possible, because that's what they're paid on, is the time they put in. So this deal dragged on for a very long time. Woman's lawyer on her end fired her several times. She would hire new ones, and they just kept it rolling. And finally, I got possession of the house. Now, here's the silver lining, and this is the great thing about real estate. Horrible situation, right? Would drive anybody crazy. Well, I kind of sat back and said, okay, whatever, and I just dealt with it, and I just waited. And the house that I had originally bought that I thought I was going to turn around and resell for 125 was now worth, I was able to resell it for 165. Now it took 2.5 years, but at the time, the only thing I was paying for was taxes and insurance. So I mean, ultimately, I ended up making money on the deal, more money on the deal than I originally had hoped to make. I think I bought it for 112, something like that. And yeah, I had to pay some taxes on it. I think I was into it for 120 or so at the end of the day, and then I sell it for 165. Where, it originally was going to be a deal I made 15 grand on. I didn't have to pay for any of the legal fees other than I had to pay for the eviction part of it at the very beginning because I hired a lawyer to evict her, and then they're like, "Yeah, we can't do this. We got to get title insurance involved and so that's the only thing I had to pay for, and ultimately ended up making more money on the deal. So it was a hairy deal. It was a hell of a deal, but at the end of the day, I was the one who ended up with the property because I bought it rightfully, and I was able to resell it and make more than I thought. So that was a cool one. Obviously my first deal where the house was bulldozed. I've had houses, I've had all kinds of fun stuff, squatters, and I've had fires, and I've had theft, and I've had all the fun negative things. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, there's not very many of these houses that I've dealt with these issues on that I didn't make money on.
Mm.
So, I mean, you do run into some things because just like any business in this world, you're going to have adversity and you're going to have situations. And when you're dealing with these homes that we're buying, it's usually buying a bad situation, which is unfortunate, but ultimately that's they need us just as much as we need the house in order to keep our business going. They've got to sell their house so they can keep their life going. And sometimes they just, everybody in this world's different. So they can throw you for a loop every so often. And so we see a lot of fun stuff like that. You know, there's stuff in houses I won't say on here, that I've seen, but it's just, it's wild. I mean, you've seen the hoarder houses. I've bought several from you. So we see some wild behavior for sure.
I was thinking of one. I don't know if it was a couple years ago up in Liberty. You bought it from me, and then the house ended up being remodeled when we took possession of
Oh
it.
my gosh.
Can you remind me of that deal? You probably remember it better than I do.
Well, is that the one where that's not the one? Is that the one where the three people died in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the story too, but not the part he was talking about. It was just a crazy house altogether. I mean, it, guy was taking care of his relatives who were incapacitated and not able to take care of themselves. He choked on something,
Mm.
died. Then the other two people weren't able to do anything for themselves, so they both died. Then the dog died. They're all dead in the house. Anyway, house smells putrid when we get it. We get it, and it's but we're waiting on something with the
I think we were
title.
waiting with probate or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. So we're waiting, and we're like, okay, we'll just wait, and somebody just swooped in, thought that they had bought the rights to it, and so they renovated the entire house, and then we close on it. Still kind of smelled a little, but the house was completely renovated, new flooring, new paint, new everything. We closed on it. We resold it. We did well on it. You did well
Yeah.
on it. I think I had to deal with a little bit of flack from those guys because of what they did, but I think it was a really dumb move on their part to go in and renovate a house before they owned it. That was just wild. So I mean, yeah, and that was in a nice neighborhood. It
Mhm.
was a newer home. It wasn't like super old. So I mean, it can happen anywhere. And that was definitely a wild story. I forgot about that one, man.
So you like to live that more passive lifestyle to where you're making a lot of money, you're doing a lot of deals, but you're with your family. These deals come with some stress and decision
Sure.
making and things. How do you manage that when you're out there on the course or you're with your family on vacation? You're having to make difficult decisions. Like, how do you, in your mind, manage all of that?
Well, um, as I said before, I mean, years ago, I decided to take kind of a different approach to my business, and to be really honest with you, for years, even in my prior businesses, I did have kind of a way about myself where I could look at a catastrophe and be like, "Nah, well, we'll get through it." And I just always used to say, "It's gonna be okay. We'll figure a way out. Figure it out, get through it." And that has kind of grown more and more on me. It used to be where I'd say that, but then I'd go to sleep and I'd be thinking about it in my sleep, or I'd wake up in the morning at 5 a.m. going, I got to deal with this situation. Now that doesn't really weigh on me like it did. I mean, now, I can have a house with a major issue, or, something comes back with inspections, or something happens in the house where somebody left a hose on, or it, a house the other day, somebody unhooked the washer. To move out of the house, they just left the hose running in the house to run through and destroy the flooring and everything. And I'm just like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to deduct that from my profit. I mean, if you put in the time with this business and you get yourself to a point where you're making good decisions about how you purchase these homes, you have room for error most of the time, if as long as you're in a safe position on your purchase. And so we are going to see things happen in these houses no matter what, whether it's big things or small things, or things that foundation stuff can completely change the way a house functions. And you've got to remake doorways and do different things like that. I mean, there's just so many things that can happen. And I don't think I let it really pierce my soul the way it used to. I mean, I like I said, I always kind of let things roll off my back, but they would still be in there. But now, not as much. I mean, I just kind of, if you ask me right now how many houses I have no idea. If you ask me how many deals I'm in the middle of, I don't really know. I know I'm usually dealing with like 30 houses at one time, whether I'm buying them, selling them, or they're sitting in my inventory. It's usually that's about my cycle. And so if I was sitting there hyper focused on 30 different houses at once right now, I'd be losing my mind. But instead, I just kind of, you know, I don't know. Maybe it's a blessing. I don't know, but it's very fortunate that I don't let it really bother me too much.
I think it's something you probably develop a callus over time.
Yeah, I mean, a comfort level too. I mean, you have to prove it to yourself. I mean, you have to prove it to yourself that these things are going to work. And once you do, and once you see it work over and over and over again, you get to a point where you're like, I feel like I can absorb that issue, and so I mean that's kind of for me, yeah.
I remember when I was younger, I would definitely get heated, like on any type of issue that would come up. It's like, let's say you flip the house and they're doing inspections, like they want the radon, they want this, they want that, and it's $5,000, and I would just be, my face would be red, and I'd be mad because it's like, oh, I put so much effort into this.
Yeah.
Now I'm like Christina, my transaction coordinator. She'll be like, oh, they're asking for this, this, and this. It's $5,000. I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
And then just like walk away. So over time you realize this is expected. And then if I have a day where things like that don't happen, I'm like, where's it at? I need to make a difficult decision.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's one of the things that, like, if you're a flipper and that's what you're planning on doing, get ready, because inspection resolutions are probably one of the biggest thorns in our side, because we're going to see them no matter what when we go to sell that property on market to an end user. It's how you negotiate it at the end of the day, and how you find your way in and out of, getting things addressed and making sure that, you fix the things that should be fixed. And then, you tell them to kick rocks on the things that they should, no, I'm not gonna, I mean, the stupid little stuff like the function of a house. One of my biggest things is fireplaces. Well, guess what? Nobody needs fireplaces anymore. It's all there for ambiance. And if you're gonna tell me that you're gonna cancel the deal because I won't replace the flue or whatever it is, or what, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you just look at certain things in a house, and I don't know. So when it comes down to it, inspection resolutions are one of the things that can really get us, but you got to know how to approach them and how to deal with them. And that takes time, and that takes having the right people to help you as well, because, no matter what, you're going to have a guy for something. And so, it's important to keep those relationships close too, because you need those guys in a pinch. I mean, whether HVAC or foundation or mud jacking or whatever it may be, plumbers and electricians. I mean, you got to have your people, and you got to have them have a good relationship with you so that they're there for you when you need them.
Next 3 to 5 years for Joe, what does that look like?
A lot of traveling.
Where are we headed?
I'm real big on playing golf courses and so I will definitely probably do some Scotland, some Ireland. I love Italy. I'm my mother full-blooded Italian, so I plan on going there and traveling, buying and selling houses, really doing the same thing I'm doing now. And I feel like what we do in the market we're in here in Kansas City, it's really a great business to be in. And I feel like, I tell people I could do this stuff. I could do what I do when I'm 85 years old, not able to walk or, barely talk. I could see, as long as my thumbs work and I can text, I can buy and sell houses all day long. And so, 3 to 5 years, I'll still be doing what I'm doing right now. And like I said, just a little more traveling, a little more golf, a little more. My kids are going to be getting older. So, as much time as I can spend with them and my wife and my family. And, that's what I feel like I'm going to be doing. I don't know. We'll see. I wouldn't mind getting a house by a beach somewhere. That would be real nice.
Maybe we can go in on one together. I want the same.
Yeah.
Well, I want you to take a second. I'm going to make some announcements, and I want you to give your 30 seconds of best advice to leave the audience with. But guys, obviously, there's wonderful people like this in your city. You need to align yourself with them. And if you want to get into the foreclosure space, sharpen your axe with that. I have a niche community to where we can teach you anything and everything from my over 800 deals doing foreclosures. So if you want your foreclosure data automated, technology to help you get a hold of these sellers, how to serve these people, how to have conversations with them, the niche community is for you. Check out the link in the description below. But Joe, your best advice that you can leave us with, of your 20 years of experience, what would you leave the listeners with?
Do this business at your own pace. Trust yourself and be easy to work with. I think those are some really important aspects. Real estate gives you that freedom to do it at your own pace. Trust yourself and have the courage to do the deal, because that's really, to do that first deal, to do that second deal, to do a deal after a deal possibly fails. You got to keep doing the deals. This is all education. Every single day in this business is education. Still to this day, 23 years into it, I'm educated all the time. And so you have to have an open mind to that. And, I feel like it's important to appreciate it and appreciate what this business gives you. Once you get successful, it's a blessing. And that's pretty much what I've got.
Awesome. If people want to connect with you, do some deals with you, how should they connect with you?
Well, I own a company called House Magic KC. You can find that online, basically on Facebook. Or, you can reach out to me. I can share some credentials. And, if you can obviously find me on Facebook and different social media outlets. But I'm always looking for deals that make sense. I can be an easy buyer for you. And, if you're looking for advice on stuff, I'm open for that as well. So, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm glad to help.
All right, man. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you. And look forward to doing some more deals.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.